All right, well, hey, welcome everyone to our Michigan Residential Net Zero Energy Conference. It's the 4th annual conference for our Net Zero coalition and collaboration. Before we start, I want to say a big thanks to our planning partners who have been here really since mostly the beginning, 4 years ago when we started doing this. There's the Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Association. There is the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, Michigan Geothermal Energy Association, DFD Architecture. There's also Dave Dye, who sits on our board and is our secretary. Come on in, everybody. And then Architectural Resource, Michael Clement. Well, so huge thanks to them for putting this on, and a majority of these folks are member-driven organizations along with us, the GreenHome Institute. So make sure that you get plugged into at least one of these entities, hopefully today, to help support them and keep supporting this, or reach out to Michael Clement or David Dye to work with them for net zero design on your project. I also want to thank our sponsors for the Net Zero Conference for this year anyway. Mitsubishi, Panasonic, Rheem, Ecotrope Aware, Indo, Build Equinox, Water Furnace, Enertech, and Rockwell. All these folks have great products that are going to help you get to net better performing homes. Some of them I think are hanging out online for those of you who are here virtually. So you can connect with them and they can chime in with some different strategies and products they might have as we're going through our conference in the chat to help you learn more. And then we're also going to be heading over to the, and for those of you in the real world here with us today, we're going to be heading over to the Ann Arbor Home Electrification Expo starting around 5 o'clock, which is sort of the formal exhibiting portion of this conference. And a lot of our sponsors will be hanging out over there to talk to people in person. There's a sign up for that, but you know, anybody can come in at any time. So, you know, just show right up to the expo. And I don't know if there's anyone who actually lives in Ann Arbor in the audience, but we're doing a competition here that started July 1st. So you can win $500 by reducing your energy over the course of a year. And if you're the one who reduces it the most to the Ann Arbor Resident Race to Zero program, you can win $500 simply by doing that. And there's other prizes that we're going to have as well throughout the competition. For those of you online listening in right now, if you stay for the entire, at least I believe the session should be probably roughly about 2 hours. We might go a little bit shorter. We don't have as many people here. So, but if you're here for a majority of the time, you will get your continuing education sent to you automatically. For those of you here in the real world, we'll sign you in. And if you need a certificate, I will pass it out to you as well if you need that certificate. And then lastly, we, on our YouTube channel, we are recording this session, so it will be available to share and to watch. So if you subscribe there, it'll be sent to you right away when we get it. And you can share that at your leisure, rewatch it, whatever you like to do. All right, so again, welcome to the Michigan Residential Net Zero Energy Conference, 4th annual energy conference, Builder Roundtable. This course is approved for multiple continuing education units. It says 1 hour, it's actually 2 hours for this session, as well as our certified GreenHome professional course under energy and AIA health, welfare, and safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Before we get started with our speakers, I just wanted to go over, you know, really just some of the framework of sort of the big picture aspects of what net zero is and what zero carbon is, and then leave it over to our speakers to really talk about how it gets implemented in the real world. So we've always had an ongoing sort of topic series called our 10 pro tips to get to net zero, zero carbon. And this has been something we learned a decade ago when we have been working with people who were building net zero homes, you know, 10 years ago, if not longer, working with them, doing green building certifications with them and learning from them. And then we took that on maybe about 5 years ago to put out trainings on it. And then it's just sort of a continuous cycle. More people start building net zero. We learn more, we update what these tips are and how they work and what we're seeing happening in the world. So we're just going to kind of go through quickly those 10 tips, and then I'm going to hand it off to our speakers who are, out there really doing it and implementing these things and how this actually works out in the real world. So the first one, it's pretty straightforward, but you kind of have to go out and say it, is that you have to make the commitment to net zero. Obviously, if you have that commitment in place and you have the team together committed to it, and you have hopefully a diverse team as far as skill set goes, design, build, mechanical, rating, renewable energy landscape, you name it, everybody committed to the goal of net zero at the beginning of the project, whatever kind of project it is, having that sort of written down saying this is what we're going to do. Obviously, that goes a long way to have that in place. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to get there if you look back and say, well, were you committed to the goal? The next thing to know is know what you're working with. And so that's this is about working backwards a little bit, taking an evaluation of the site itself, looking at the solar resources on the site, the geothermal energy resources on the site, maybe other renewable resources, and then how you would design the building appropriately to take advantage of passive solar gain. And so you're really getting that sense of here's the site that we're dealing with, or maybe you get to choose your site and trying to work backwards and say, we can generate 30,000 kilowatt hours on the site. So we have to kind of work backwards from that. And then here's our opportunities or our limits to passive solar. So that's important to do, as sort of a next step after you've made that commitment. That's what we see. The next is right-sized homes, right-sized spaces. And so, we're not talking necessarily about tiny homes, but how do we shrink the conditioned square footage of our projects to where there's still, where we can still live in them appropriately. We can live larger and it can still function. And I don't want to put a number out there. It's just, that's the idea, is what is the size that it needs to be for the goals of the project. And so two things there, you shrink conditioned space. So you shrink mechanical heating that's needed to reduce operational carbon. And then you can also shrink how much materials go in, which then reduce upfront or embodied carbon, which is something that's very important to do. And this is something that we have new on our list. And that is that at the end of the day, as we get building better, all of you are starting to build closer, more energy efficient homes. Our operational energy is going to get so low that really all the carbon in our homes is going to come from the materials and the construction practices in the end of the life. So we need to start thinking about how much carbon is going into the actual materials that are being put into the home, and thinking that through new modeling software that's coming out. We're doing a webinar in the next month with our friends from Canada, Chris Magwood on Beam. Super excited about that. And we're going to be talking about how do we drive this down in a way that still allows for a more effective home to work to be, net zero. And talk about setting goals. Our recommendation is to always set passive house as the goal at the top, no matter what you're doing, whether that's the certification or just the targets. So we're talking about a super energy efficient shell, airtight building, appropriate to whatever climate zone you might be building in. And so set that as the goal. If you set a lower goal, you're probably going to fall short of that goal. So if you set passive house as the goal, knowing that you probably won't make it, you won't certify, and that's okay. You just set it as the goal and you get really close, and you're going to end up with a more energy efficient structure than if you had a lower setting. And then finally, once you're able to do that, we can move on to full electrification of the building. So we're talking about air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, geothermal energy, water heating, air source water heaters, induction cooking ideally, and electric dryers, probably condensing or heat pump dryers. And we can do that once we've got a super tight envelope. We can do that even in the coldest of climates. We can move towards full electrification. And why that's important is that we can't really offset methane gas that we're burning with renewables. We can only do that with electricity. So we need to move quickly towards electrification within our projects. And we're going to be talking about that a lot today. Next is, depending on the budget of the project, and we understand lately budgets are strapped, but can we make homes that we're doing the project on solar and EV ready? So the electrical upgrades don't need to be made in the future. It's already plugged in. And so you can just, again, you can just plug in a car charger when it's appropriate. You can just plug the solar in when it's appropriate. And also from a solar standpoint, you're talking again back to pro tip number 2, having it ready to go, pre-designed so that solar is right facing the appropriate direction, or there's enough space on the site to put that on there. And again, we're not judging if the project cannot be solar or EV is plugged in at that time. They can at least be ready to go so that it's not difficult or expensive for the owners to do at a later time. Here is our accountant, Tim Burgess, with your expert bean counter, showing off his battery. He's also got a recent solar system installed on his house. And so we're always grateful to have accountants who are using less carbon when they're doing our accounting for us. So, but what's important about this is that having a conversation about not just how much energy we're using, but now we need to shift to having a conversation of when we're using. And how do we build and renovate homes and work with the ultimate buyers to think about when they're using energy and get them to think a little bit differently about that. And so at the high level, that is batteries. Of course, you can set a battery to not use energy at certain peak times when it costs more and it's more carbon intense. And typically at that time too, it's polluting low-income communities and communities of color, which is very frustrating. And so there's a lot social justice aspect to this. But then, and then you can do west-facing solar panels. You know, they produce less energy overall, but they're producing energy during that peak time. And then also this can scale down to other things like smart home appliances that can be designed to work only, run when the peak goes away, 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever your time might be. You can set your washer, your dishwasher, clothes washer to do that. So we need to start thinking during the construction process how this home can use energy when it's lower cost, lower carbon. And on that note, at the end of the day, what net zero had been in the past had been this idea that we would bank a lot of solar power in the summer and we would use it to buy down winter. Because at the end of the day, we just don't get any solar in the winter. So we're still pulling a lot of energy off of the grid. It's really carbon intense energy. I can tell you that from experience. It is a lot of power when you're all electric in the dead of winter. And so you as builders, as designers and architects, you can't really control that, right? You can do everything you can to make it as efficient as possible to put on solar. But at some point, you've done everything, and your buyers, the consumers, homeowners have done everything that they can. So how do we use these projects to advocate for the other side of the equation, to go to our policymakers, our legislators, community leaders, utilities, and say, look, you need to meet us halfway. We're going to get you efficient homes. You need to come in and bring the renewable systems in so you can power our homes this way and we can have a better planet. So how do we use our projects as an advocacy role to educate people and to say, this is where we come in, this is where you come in. I would argue that's a tip of, of what we need to be doing here. And then lastly, certification. Certifying the project, whether it be the Passive House Source Zero certification, Living Building Challenge, Zero Carbon, LEED Zero Now, our Zero Energy Capable program. Get a certification that helps guide the project from the beginning. And then ultimately it's a marketing aspect to just say, hey, here's what we've done, we can prove it. And sometimes there's incentives along with that. So again, those are just sort of what we've learned, and we're always learning new things from talking to people who are out there doing this. And but at the end of the day, let's hear from the people who are on the ground building and how they're able to achieve these things, what the barriers are and all the goals are. So we have a whole set of questions set up through this session to ask. And then from there, we will, after each question, besides the first one, we're going to open it up to the audience, both online and in person, and let you all either ask clarification questions on each one as we go, rather than waiting till the end. Or maybe you have something to share from something some of your experience, and so just say, hey, here's my experience with this particular topic. And I think there's a lot of value to that. So for those of you who are online, what we'll try to do is get a couple of your comments. We'll reread them out. We'll reread re-speak everybody's comments in the back so you can hear them. Yeah, we'll just do that in between each of our 8 questions for the speakers. And so I'm really excited here. We've got 4 great speakers lined up. I'm going to let them introduce themselves so you don't have to hear from me anymore. And then then from there, we're just going to go in the order that's listed here. So it looks like you guys are kind of set on the other side, but that's okay. We'll pass the mic around. And then we'll just get to the audience questions and then go back around again. And yeah, we should have a good time. What I just want to say as a sort of summary of our speakers, what I think is we've got a really good diversity as far as housing project types and experiences here. You know, we've got single family to some small extent, multi-family experience. We've got gut rehab, new construction. We've got people self-design, self-build, everything all the way up to, you know, design build and client build construction. Folks who are just kind of right now focused on electrification as a big hurdle and even embodied energy. And so there is a lot of experience here, and I'm excited to just enter into this conversation and see what we have. So first I will hand it over to Jamie, who can answer the first question here, and then we'll go from there. So.
Thank you, Brett. So my name is Jamie Galimberti. I have a business called VectorSource, which is actually right here in Ann Arbor, which specializes in design visualization. So, Brett, if you want to jump to the next slide. These are not projects I designed, but they're renderings that I've produced. So exterior, interior, different kinds of buildings, whether it's commercial, residential. I work with a lot of different architects, developers, and specific clients as well. So anywhere from doing light studies, so photorealistic renderings, I'll do diagrams, or even like experiential visualization, like virtual reality, if you want to see how spaces actually feel to walk around and move before you build it. Now, all of this is my business, but this is not why I'm here. Actually, the next slide is why I'm here. I'm here as a homeowner.
Oh, that was your only intro slide there.
Oh, no problem.
And the rest aren't loading, so you want to keep going on.
Yes, so my wife and I are building our own home here in Ann Arbor by hand, and it is a all-electric, net zero ready. We're pursuing LEED certification, and so we are kind of at ground level experiencing what it takes to produce a net zero home.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I'll let you know when it's done. It's something we started, we actually lucked out right before the pandemic, before lockdown. We found a property that we could develop that was just down the street from our house. So, but then we were able to secure a home equity line of credit. And so we had the funds to get us through the pandemic. And so, you know, my work declined quite a bit. And so I was able to just walk down the street and get my hammer out and start building. And so it's been a long process, of course, and we're still kind of finalizing things. These are some later photos when we talk about the envelope. But you can see it. This is the photo on the bottom left is actually taken earlier this week. So we're still working on kind of the rain screen and some of the exterior details. But at the same time, we also have all the HVAC going, and we're getting the actual data on how the house is performing. It's really cool to see like the results of having a $20 heating bill in June. It's like, wow, this is awesome. So I look forward to sharing more of the details with you later on in the presentation.
Are you open for questions right now, Bill, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, we're gonna get through everybody
Overall,
and
and
then
then
go
come
into
back.
Q&A. Yeah. So Mike is up. I got you up next.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Mahon. I'm the owner of Adaptive Building Solutions. My wife and I own the company based here in Ann Arbor. And we have been, you know, we stuck our sign in the ground back in 2008 to learn and execute as much of the green building principles that that we could, as far as what customers are willing to do. So as time has gone on, we've been fortunate enough to have several customers come to us seeking various types of certifications, and we've partnered with a architect Michael Clement of Architectural Resources, who's sitting here in the front row. And as a collaborative method, we use an integrative design approach. Other people might call it design build, but where the builder and the architect and the client is all, it forms a team early in the design process so that we can work our way through not only the costs, which is my role in the design team, but also looking at ways that we can build and design effectively and efficiently, especially with costs being as high as they are and labor being at a premium. Because there are a lot of tricks to building this way to a net zero category. And, you know, a lot of that has to do with the way and the layers that we apply throughout the framing process and beyond. So we're right now just finished our second passive certified home out in Manchester. We've just finished a LEED platinum net zero home in Ann Arbor. We are currently doing a LEED platinum net zero home in Northville, and a gut renovation in North Ann Arbor that will also be seeking LEED platinum net zero. And then in design, we have 3 other projects that range from Living Building Challenge, will be our first LBC project out in Manchester, and 2 more LEED platinum net zero custom homes. So we're all in, and we have spent the last, I would say, 10 years really working with our subcontractors. My wife and I, you know, we're general contractors. We don't have any employees, so we have relationships with our subcontractors that go back 15 years, and it's taken some time to train and get these crews on board with what it is that we're doing, so that I don't have to babysit them every day. And it's taken some time, but it's great that, you know, we're starting to see the results. That passive house out in Manchester had a HERS score of a 7 after solar. Which, if anybody knows anything about HERS, that's a pretty remarkable number. Pre-solar, they were at a HERS 27. So, you know, the concept of net zero, I think, embodies all of the certificates, and is a great, very recognizable marketing and tag word for people to begin to understand what makes an energy efficient, high performance, energy efficient home different from a code built home. So I think the net zero label is something that has a lot of potential and is just now starting to gain momentum. So we're really excited about the future of net zero.
All right, Abby.
Hello, I'm Abby Langenberg. I'm from Habitat for Humanity of Kent County. That's over in the Grand Rapids area. I'm the construction director over there. So if you don't know, which I hope you do, we are an affordable housing provider. So that means we do both renovations and new builds. And for our new builds, we serve families that have an income of 60% of the area median income or less. So those are low to moderate income families. So one of our core values at Habitat is stewardship. So that means for us, we are, you know, stewarding our environment too. So looking at that, how can we innovate in the building process? How can we think about how to take care of our earth? So for a long time, we've been doing LEED and Energy Star certified homes, and then also, you know, looking at how we can continue to expand that. That led us to last year pursuing our first all-electric home. So we just completed that, and it generated a lot of excitement, probably a lot more than we even anticipated. And so we'll be expanding that and are looking forward to breaking ground in the next month or 2 on another project that will be, it's actually 3 attached single-family homes and will be all electric as well. So those are kind of our main projects that we've been pursuing.
I'm Jake LeFan with Fireside Home Construction. We are a home builder and remodeler, and like Mike was talking about, we work with Michael with a lot of certified type projects.
So for a little bit of company history, my business partner, Bob Burnside, started Fireside Home Construction back in 1996, I believe. And we've always started off with a sustainable energy construction from all the way back then. We've been using things like HRVs and ERVs and really focused on indoor air quality and insulation and sealing it up, making sure it's sealed up right and ventilated properly. We've always been part of like EVA for the Environmental Energy Efficiency Alliance and all that. So back in 2017, when Bob moved to Fireside down here to the Ann Arbor area, 2007, I helped him design and build a mission home. It has solar panels, geothermal. We have, a bunch of trades folks around here in the Ann Arbor area that helped us with that project. And in 2017, we partnered with Michael Clement at Architectural Resource, and we built the living building in 2017. At the time, that was second in the world ever certified as a living building challenge project. Currently, right now, we are building a passive house, which is going to be, it's in Birmingham. It's going to be the first 2021. Is it 2021? Is that what it is called?
2021.
So that's going to be the first certified passive house for that. We just had our pre-installation blow door test, and it came in at a 0.3,
No,
which is
0.03.
yeah, 0.03. So it came in exceptionally well. It's already better than, it's twice as better what's required to certify where we're at right now. And the rater said we're on track to have the tightest house record in Michigan. So we're pushing to do that, and so we're on the right track there. That was the execution of the building science, like first perfect wall assembly, and it's going well. Takes a lot of labor, a lot of layers. There was a lot of on-site management, and we luckily have a great superintendent and carpenters that have built these types of homes before that we work with, and that's a key on doing these projects. Like Mike mentioned, is managing the trades is just as important as managing like your own process and working with the architects and understanding all the details and everything that goes into it. There's a lot of, it's like an onion. There's a million layers, and you have to hit each one right. So, and we're currently in the process of working on a project with some architects and a homeowner out in South Haven. And their goal is to be both a living building challenge and a passive house certified that will be getting started on this coming spring. So in general, a lot to do with budgets and everything. We do a lot of high performing homes, new construction and remodeling. And the challenge with budgets definitely determines if it's going to go for a certification or not. But we always, take indoor air quality, insulation, sealing it up, and doing everything as a main principle, and then figuring out at what level of detail does it go to. So we always want to make sure it's done right and it performs well.
All right, so we're gonna get into our first main question. We'll go through that, and then we'll get into audience questions from there. So really, these are just, market opportunities, trends, challenges, again, to reach net zero. How does this impact upfront and ongoing costs, especially in light of increasing energy costs as well, not just material costs? We've got supply labor shortages, increased costs. At one point, we had issues with solar panels that may have been cleared up, but maybe you're still feeling the strain from that too. I'm not really sure, so let's find out. And what do you see emerging on the road ahead as far as what you're forecasting for in regards to, again, just these opportunities, trends, and challenges around net zero? So I'll start with you, Jamie.
Well, I'm not a builder, so I don't really have the experience of how things have been in the past, but I know personally we had a budget when we started the project, and that changed very quickly. Material costs shot up, labor costs shot up, which luckily we were doing labor ourselves, so that kind of helped us a bit. But because of the increased material costs, we did have to go for net zero ready instead of going net zero. We got to hold on the solar panels for now. But a lot of the things we did experience is that some to build a high performance home wasn't crazy. Like on the exterior of our house, we have 4 inches of EPS, and compared to the entire cost of all materials, that was just so minimal that it was like, I will always do this, because I mean, a lot of it is the time you put in and the detail of the work. And you know, for us, since we're doing it, that's not a cost to us. So I can't imagine not moving forward with a lot of the things we chose to do. A lot of our process was built around what can 2 people do on their own. And so a lot of our decisions were based on that. And so kind of trying to find a balance between what was achievable by homeowners building a house and then also the cost. So we kind of tried to find the middle ground with that. So for our foundation, we did ICFs because that's very user friendly. You build it like Legos and then you fill it up with concrete. That process was a lot of fun, great, and affordable for us. And then a lot of the framing, we did more traditional framing for the roofs rather than trusses because it's 2 of us. We can just carry up the lumber, do piece by piece until it's finished and assembled rather than having to hire you know, crane operators to bring it in and have all the materials shipped to the site.
I wrote it down. Yeah, piggybacking off of what Jamie was saying, you know, right now, you know, we're in a bit of a tricky time when it comes to cost, obviously. We're seeing that, you know, demand is up for home building. We get calls every week for remodeling, additions, new home construction, that we just simply don't have the bandwidth to accommodate. With the demand being high and the supply being, you know, at a 10-year low, costs have gone up. We're seeing 25-30% across the board. So we may have, you know, 5 to 10% increase in drywall and concrete. Fuel is adding to that, and inflation is adding to that. And we have you know, we went as high as 300% increase on lumber from pre-COVID to the peak. And it's receded a little bit, but we're still 2.5 times the cost of pre-COVID lumber. So material cost is high, and I don't see that it is going to pull back a whole lot. You know, lumberyards will eventually become a little bit competitive and start dropping $1 here, $1 there. But it seems that this new price point is here to stay for the long term. The market opportunities, are we on market opportunities yet or no?
I have a couple of questions that came in here. Can I ask?
Sure.
If it's relevant. First one is, have new materials been developed that assist in building of better net zero homes and buildings? If so, what are they and what are they used for in construction?
Yeah, so one of the things that I had written down that we're using quite a bit, and Jake can also speak to this, you know, the zip sheathing has been a game changer for our framers in terms of helping to create that first air and vapor control layer that gives us that air tightness that we're looking for in framing. It's a pretty easy system. It's really the panel itself, the OSB panel itself is the barrier. It's got a green coating on it, and a lot of people think that that's what the barrier is that green latex coating, but it's not. It's just to designate that this is a zip sheet, and it primarily makes it so that the joint tape can stick to the panel, because joint tape's just not going to stick to particle board unless it's got a coating on it. So once we applied zip and do the zip tape with the roller, you know, we've eliminated a very large portion of our air leaks that are coming out of traditional, stick-built homes. I know a lot of people are using T-studs to create a thermal break in their walls. If not, then like Jamie was saying, we're putting insulation outboard of that zip sheathing. As we've spoken many times with our architect, Michael, and in diving deep into building science, we We know that there is a dew point in the middle of any wall where the heat from the inside is meeting the cold from the outside during winter, and that heat flashes and turns into vapor and moisture. We want to manage that so that we can create durability factor for the home to last 100 years. So by putting this insulation outside with furring strips, gives us an opportunity then to attach insulation, gives us a what's referred to as a rain screen or rain channel, a drying mechanism with that furring strip between the outboard insulation and the siding choice. Another product that's been brought to market to make it easier for builders and homeowners to achieve a low blower door test score is air barrier. Air barrier is just simply a vaporized caulk that is sprayed into a house that's positively pressured. This caulk then seeks to escape through all of the holes and little cracks and crevices in the home that have not been sealed up. Through the Venturi effect, it actually gloms onto itself until the hole is sealed up. It's great for renovations. It's even great for new builds that are trying to, get to that really, really low blower door test score. So those are products that people are using. There's another product called the Express header, which is basically 2 LVLs that are sandwiched around a 2-inch piece of EPS or XPS foam. That creates a bit, again, that thermal bridging break that you see when you have an infrared camera on a house in the winter, and you can see all the red timbers make the heat coming through the building, or that heat loss is occurring. So this is just one product that helps eliminate that thermal bridge that we get in stick frame construction. I'm sure you guys have a few other things too that you've used. Those are the big ones though.
Yeah, those are the main ones,
Yeah.
like mineral wool,
Yep.
4x8 sheets of mineral wool panels.
Yep.
Those were tough to get for a while there, but.
Yeah, we're, and Jake brought up a really good point. The mineral wool is something that we've embraced in the last year. As designers and builders, we've embraced. Our installers have not quite embraced it yet because it's a little itchy and a little bit tough to work with. They like the foam because it's easy to cut. They don't have to wear a mask, and in the summer it's not sticking to their skin. But when it's hot and sweaty outside and you're installing big mineral wool panels that you have to cut and the wind's blowing and that mineral wool is blowing and sticking to your skin, it's not pleasant. So we got to work through that. But the embodied carbon penalty that comes with using foam is so high that we did some math and calculated that it would be 25-30 years of energy savings to offset the carbon that was used to make the foam panels that are under, aside, and above the houses that we were building. We're putting up to 10 inches of this stuff underneath a slab on grade home. So the embodied carbon in that was just such a high penalty that we started looking for other resources, and the folks at Rockwool have developed a high density Rockwool panel that can actually go under concrete slabs. So we're working with the Comfort Board 110 and Comfort Board 80 products under slabs, under basement slabs, under garage slabs, and around the outside of the house, exterior of the zip sheathing.
Why don't we get through these questions and then we'll come back to some of the Q&A. So
Okay.
just so everyone gets there.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So Abby, go ahead.
Sure. Obviously, we come from a little bit of a different lens. These guys are building incredible homes, and our big focus is obviously affordability. So we're at the point where, for this upcoming project that's an attached 3-family, when I got the quote for the HVAC, since it's all electric, I about fell over. So for us, we're thinking about, this new technology. We're on this cusp of a lot of change, and really excited about the potential that as demand increases, that innovation is going to continue to happen and create more opportunities for us, and that those costs are actually down, and just make it more possible for us to continue to do this. So we're not quite at that point yet. There's still so much change that's happening really quickly. And we are always thinking about what what are we burdening our home buyer with? So, we are staying away from mini splits or a ductless system. All of our home buyers, changing a furnace filter is kind of a big deal. There's just a ton of education that comes with that. So look through that lens, and those, if right now it's like if a head goes bad, to go and replace that is huge cost, or if you needed a retrofit for a ducted system, that's just an astronomical cost for our home buyer. So that's really the lens that we're coming through. And the opportunities for us look like better education for the public, for donors, and for them to see that how much of an impact and how important this is, and hopefully kind of shed more light on it and kind of create excitement for us. And really, if a donor doesn't think it's important, our ability to be able to do it is obviously lessened. So I think our biggest supply challenges probably have been windows. I don't know if that's been a thing for you guys. So it's been, a lot of just kind of advanced planning, and it's I barely get through the building review, and then I go ahead and order the windows. So that's about what I got for that.
Kind of build on what Mike was talking about a little bit. We've been dealing a lot with trying to source materials from multiple distributors rather than just going to one supplier like a lumber yard, anything like that. Like they just simply haven't had materials. It's starting to get better now, but there was like when we started our passive house at the end of last year, we had mineral, like the comfort board sheets that Mike was talking about, specified on the outside of our ICF foundation, and it was just simply not available. I was talking with Rockwool Direct, their direct regional salespeople, and said, you're not going to see this material until after the first quarter of next year at best. And that was true. So we had to get creative, and we had to, make a switch with working with Michael and Susan, the architects over at Architectural Resource. And we actually had to site router our own 2-inch styrofoam or dowel XPS boards, put drainage grooves on the back of it in the dead of winter, so we could actually put this drainage insulation on the outside of the wall. So you have to get creative and try to figure out how to make it happen. Otherwise, you can't have a job just sit for 4 months, because the materials are not available. We are getting ready to install the solar panels on that project, and we can get the panels, and we can get these different inverters and these new technologies that the homeowner is putting into his house. But we're having to source them from multiple resources. It's not, our solar installer, he's not able to just go to his normal resource and order the 20 kilowatts of panels that he needs.
Who's your installer?
His name is John Wakeman with SUR Energy. So I was talking to him today, and he was telling me about how he had to go to 2 or 3 different distributors to get what he needed. And the biggest cost driver on solar right now, with that going up, is more on the electrical side of things, the wiring and all the components to it. The actual panels themselves, they've been pretty stable, from a pricing standpoint. So that's from a material standpoint, that's just one of the things that we're always trying to manage, is managing lead times. Cabinets are from when you order them. Windows were 6 months, now they're coming down to 4 months, depending on the manufacturer. So some of that's starting to get a little bit better, but it's still things you need to plan for. When you used to be able to start framing and order windows, right when you start framing and they're there 4 weeks later, that being 4 to 6 months later, that you're really having to back schedule projects based off of when you can get materials. So the job's just not sitting there empty for 2 months with nothing happening, because you can only get so far without windows in the house. So it's just a lot of challenges and a lot of micromanagement of trying to make sure everything goes as according to plan as best as you can plan for it. Otherwise, you expect things to be challenging and take longer than expected with today's market. So, was there any other specific questions you're looking for?
Well, yeah, let's take them from the audience, so go ahead.
So these multiple wall assemblies and these layers, and you've all mentioned this, and doing pre-construction energy modeling to identify the point of diminishing returns for a particular wall assembly, because I know through being a mechanical contractor for 30 years, doing load calculations and energy modeling on buildings pre-construction, we know that at certain money into attic insulation, or, you never stop throwing money into air tightness. Best place to just always go right for, perfect. But what are you doing to identify that, where that point of diminishing return is, and then reducing your structural size, for example, instead of a 2x6 to 2x4 for lower lumber costs, for example?
Yeah, so with our experience working with the Passive House Institute, that they require, and we get free afterwards. So that means our plans are completely fully baked, and our architects are using the WUFI software to model the energy performance of those wall structures. So what we've dialed into is a 2x6 wall filled with cellulose or mineral wool, and the zip sheathing with 3 inches of exterior insulation, now mineral wool, previously was XPS, and the furring strip. And there have been times when we were looking at R value and even counted the R value of the drywall, which is, half inch of drywall is like an R of 1. So to try to, dial this wall in to get it to be, somewhere around, where are we, like an R30 plus?
30 to 35.
R30 to 35. So we've gone higher than that. And I can't answer your question specifically in terms of the modeling, because I think it depends on who's doing the modeling and what software they're using. But that's the comfort zone that we've landed in. As far as switching and trying to, use materials that reduce budget cost. We looked at the 2x4 wall without using spray foam. We were not able to achieve the R value that we needed without putting a lot of insulation outside the zip sheathing, which then disrupts that dew point.
But was the need for the rating, or was the need to accomplish an energy goal? Because one of the things that we find is that at some point, the return on that investment in that wall assembly doesn't necessarily pay the dividends down. And I'll speak specifically from the mechanical side, because you can only get so small before you can't move that energy. Even if the home is a right-sized home, you can't move that energy around the home, or you still end up with a larger outdoor unit to handle the number of heads if it's a mini split system. There's a certain point where those investments don't incrementally reduce the cost of associated things like mechanical systems specifically. And that's what I'm talking about, the point of diminishing return, because we still have to put ducting in, and we still have to move that heat or cool energy somewhere and somehow, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so now you've introduced mechanicals into that equation, which then, backs it up a little bit when trying to size the mechanicals. So I think first of all, maybe it's a matter of finding that perfect wall structure that works for you, with your trades, your costs, what you can do. And then taking that information and looking at your volume and your square footage and trying to size then your mechanicals to that.
Well, and sharing that budget around is what I'm saying, is if you can save, let's throw numbers out, you can save 5,000 on a wall assembly because you've reached the point of diminishing returns and how it would help to reduce the mechanical cost. And then you can reinvest that into mechanicals or fewer solar panels, or maybe a couple more solar panels to accomplish the goal as a holistic approach.
Yeah, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
but the problem is in residential construction, we don't have access to the commercial software that's being used to dictate numbers down to that micro level. We just don't have it, diminishing returns on a wall, if we go another ½ inch, then what's the cost, which by the way changes from month to month. So how do you put a number on that? We can't, we can't get that specific. So what we're doing basically is setting our marks with the wall that we have, that we know we can build at an affordable price. We try to fine tune that. Then we look at the mechanical system as being, obviously not needing what we would need if we were just building the code. And so we can look at our difference between what we're doing and what code built is, to say, well, what would you have needed if it was code? And now what can we get away with since we have such a robust thermal envelope that we've created? So
The
we,
mechanical part of that, though, is the smallest portion. The labor doesn't change. If you build a 2,000 square foot home, just as an example,
Yeah.
it's gonna have the same amount of labor to put in that duct system, if we're doing a ducted system, whether you're passive design or whether you're
Yeah.
code built.
Yep.
The only thing that changes is the infrastructure, the size of that mechanical system itself, which is in our industry is the smallest portion of the cost, because labor, like in your industry, labor is the driving force in a lot of cases on costs. So,
yeah, so really to wrap this up, because I'm sure there's some other questions and we can take this off to the side as well. The idea is that we're investing in that robust thermal envelope so that we can reduce the amount of HVAC and mechanicals that would be required to heat and cool this home efficiently. So we know that we're using, instead of having to use a 5-ton geosystem, we can use a 3-ton geosystem to heat and cool this house effectively. So there's a huge cost savings there, $20,000, and whether we can squeeze, $1,000 out of a wall assembly or not, when we spend the time of the amount of time we spend designing and everything, we're looking less at what we can do. We've already refined our walls to where we can get, the maximum output from the wall per cost. And now we're looking at really ways to reduce our mechanical costs, which, are still going up as well. So, but they're getting better. I did an all electric house myself, and we went with the, air source heat pump. And as Brett mentioned, it uses a lot of electricity in the winter, but it sets us up for being in a situation where we can count on, 100% renewable energy to power our home, whether it's the dryer, the stove, or our heating and cooling system. And I think that those efficiencies are getting better and better by the quarter. Really, every time I open up a magazine, there's a new one that's coming out that's more efficient than the last one. So they're chomping at the bit to perfect air source heat pumps. And I think it will bring the cost down too, because this is a question that we have to answer all the time is, we have customers that come to us and say, I don't have $1 million to build a passive house, but I know I want one, and I know I want those features, and I want that energy efficiency and that indoor air quality Jake talks about. So what can we do? And a lot of sacrifices that would be involved with, building one that is that energy. But as long as the customer is willing to make some sacrifices, we're able to get pretty close. I think these guys are probably able to get as close as anybody because of the pressure of having to produce that budget-friendly, low-income housing. So, do you have another question?
The question was about, you say you build an optimized wall. You also mentioned the carbon footprint of home. So where do you put T-studs in that equation?
Yeah. So, as far as I know, the T-stud basically was manufactured to give the builder an opportunity to have a thermal break without having to apply exterior foam, because the break is in the stud. So, I would think that it's probably a better product if you're not doing exterior insulation in a climate zone that's not quite as extreme with diurnal temperature swings that we have here. 0 in the winter and 95 in the summer. Maybe, a little bit 500 miles south, maybe it makes more sense. We simply just need to have more insulation in our wall overall. So we're going to have a thermal break by putting that exterior insulation outside the zip, so we don't need the T-stud. Yeah.
Quick question to follow that up.
Yeah.
T-studs, they used to have 2 different products. One was the integrated foam and a thermal break, and now they have one which is just broken.
Open, right?
Open completely.
Right.
I imagine that question is going to be answered differently for which type of T-stud we're using there. That lower carbon value for the just open ones.
Yeah, and I think the open one allows you to put, cellulose or blown fiberglass or whatever, so that reducing your carbon footprint there, because the T-stud that comes with the foam will have a little penalty with in the back.
I'm wondering if any of you have experimented with or have come up with systems to use the below ground temperature mediation of a basement or something like that in order to enhance the rest of the
So like, for example, like, are you talking about maybe in summer, using the cool ground temperature to aid in supplementing? Geothermal, yeah.
Your basement, my basement is 55, 60 degrees year round.
Yeah.
In the winter, I've got warmer air in my basement, it's outside. In the summer, I've got cool air.
Yeah.
It's outside.
Yeah, I mean, that's, so the geothermal systems that we're using with the wells, obviously, is taking advantage of that constant temperature, 55 degrees, as you get, 6 feet below grade, all the way down to 600 feet. What I think, if I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about is not using a geothermal system, but just taking advantage of that air, that constant air temperature. We're able to do it with an air-to-air source heat pump for hot water heating. It cools off the basement quite a bit because it sucks every ounce of heat out of the air in the basement to heat your hot water. And the byproduct is cold air coming out, but it is a free source of energy to heat hot water. If I'm understanding correctly, in the summertime, that basement 55 degrees is cool, and you're wondering if there's a way to take advantage of that. We've toyed with putting 6-inch and 4-inch PVC tubes under the slab to take advantage of that cold air that's running under the slab in the summer, to see if we could pull that air out and into the rest of the house to supplement the cooling. We just kept running into moisture and humidity, which then was, dark humidity equals bacteria, and we couldn't find a way around it. But we still talk about it from time to time over a cup of coffee or a beer, about how we could utilize that ground temperature to try to cool the building in summer.
So I run my fan on my furnace. Year round.
Yeah.
And your returns in the basement are open.
Pull that air up. That's a great
I
idea.
don't know whether that's just a pure trade-off in electricity for gas. I don't know.
No, well, so you're using electric for your air conditioning, and if you're running your blower, you're using less, because you're not making cold air and running a compressor. So I've heard of people doing that, and pulling that air out of the basement and distributing it up into the upper floors of the house to try to supplement some of the cooling. I know you had a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. So I was just gonna, to your point, Matthew Brokoff, who has the Thrive Collaborative and is working on, I think it's Viridian Farm.
Mhm.
He in his home has geothermal, but he uses like a whole house fan to take advantage of what you're talking about. So in his personal home, he's done something like that where he pulls the basement air up throughout the house, because the basement gets really cold and everything.
It's
But I
fun.
had a
It is something that's come up from time to time. It's just hard to make the house airtight with the
Right.
house fan. What was your question?
I had a question for Abby, actually, and it was about your mechanicals in the Habitat homes. You said you're not using mini split systems, but I wondered, what are you using, if not a variable speed mini split product? Because those don't have to be ducted. So I was wondering what you are using.
Sure. So we are in the process of moving towards going completely all electric. It's just kind of that question of where do we draw the line in the sand, because you have to look at the cost of it, right? So we did the one last year, and in that one we used a heat pump furnace.
Did you
So
use dual fuel or did you use an all electric?
it was an all electric. Yeah.
Okay. So you use it everywhere.
Yes.
And that's centrally. electric.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
perfect.
And then that will most likely be what we use in this upcoming project as well, because when we look at the cost, that is our most cost effective that I found, mechanism for an all electric home at this point. definitely still trying to explore it and figure out what is the most cost effective and how do we do this in the best way? And so I'm always open to education in that way. So that's what we're doing currently. Otherwise,
So it's an inverter, are you using inverter driven heat pumps, like variable speed systems, or like, are you doing a single stage with a large backup heat strip?
can I answer that question?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, then that technically is, it's technically listed as a mini split product.
Interesting.
It doesn't use ducted indoor unit.
We're looking at the Fujitsu system for this upcoming project. Because they're actually
Okay,
a
yeah.
little bit more cost effective than a Mitsubishi.
Yeah, those are great too.
Sure.
If you want to save money, and you have a geothermal system and you live in the DTE service territory, it's a time of day rate, Monday to Friday, 10 to 7. So if you're cheap like me, you cranked up the air conditioner at 7:01, and then you turned it off at 8 o'clock when you left in the morning. And if your house is relatively well insulated, by the time you got home, unless it was 95 degrees, you could go till 7 o'clock and then run at the lower rate. If you live in consumers, basically you're screwed. You should sell your house and move to DT territory and buy a geothermal in the DT territory. My one question on geothermal versus air source. A geothermal system lasts 25 years and air source lasts 15. Do you take that into consideration in making your choice, or basically that's the customer's problem when they got to replace it?
A lot of it comes down to budgets too, you know, so we're constantly, I'm sure Mike can attest to this, we're constantly getting ground down on what things cost, where do we find different alternatives, what are the different systems? And it kind of touched on Rob's question about where is that diminishing return? We can really focus on that and value engineer like those wall and roof systems when we're doing like a non-certified project. If we're just doing like a standard high performing house where we really want it, but when we're doing like a high performing house where we want it airtight, we want the, better than code wall systems and, R60 roofs and different things to make sure it's ventilated properly. That's where we can really kind of try to dial in that value engineer those projects. But when it's like a certified project, like a passive house or an LBC, you have to meet those criteria. And we work with architects like Michael, and they're adjusting. Do we need 3.5 inches of foam under the slab so we can have a different wall thickness above? So it's not like a prescriptive method, and they're constantly tweaking. Or is it 24 inches of cellulose in the attic, or is it 3 feet of cellulose in the attic? And then does that allow us to make the wall 12 inches wide or 10 inches wide? So it's like a constant shell game. So when you're doing a certified project, you kind of have to not think about diminishing returns. The goal is a certification.
But I think you're missing the real trade-off. The real trade-off is not, do I put it in the insulation here or there? To me, the real trade-off is, do I put it in energy efficiency in the house, or do I have a granite countertop? No, seriously, that's what people make decisions.
Sure.
And the granite countertop looks beautiful, but it doesn't add a penny of energy saving. There's no payback or cost in that. And that's, to me, that's a real, and most people they can't see the energy that at least 50,000.
What we're finding is the Ann Arbor community and this local, community has a decent amount of public awareness and education.
That's so true. Ann Arbor,
So
Grand
it's an
Rapids,
easy sell.
Grand Rapids too.
And probably in Grand Rapids and some of the other urban areas, as we get out a little further away, it has to be a personal interest of the homeowner. Because if you're going to try to sell them on these upgrades and take away their cherry wood floors and cabinets and granite, that could be a little bit of a battle. One of the things that we have been able to do though, and I'll get to that other question, is to show the savings over a period of a decade or two, to show that savings is a college education for $250,000 in a mutual fund, 20 years after Johnny's born. So that helps people understand, invest now, live better, live in a better, higher quality of indoor air quality, and then have that savings, you know, at the end of the road and make a few sacrifices in terms of the things. Durability is one thing that we try not to sacrifice on, because durability is you buy it once and you've got it for however long you want it. Instead of, you know, a production home where you buy it once and you're going to be fixing it for the next 35 years. So
I want to thank you guys. The questions have been great to me. Really good questions and really good answers. I
Thanks.
really.
there's a,
Well, my
Yeah.
question is just to follow up on Larry's point and your comment. Have you developed any kind of a spreadsheet where you could plug in different factors to show in the long term, you know, you invest money here versus the granite countertop, you're gonna save X amount of money in order to have the capital for your $250,000
Yep.
mutual fund?
yes,
Solar installers, they use spreadsheets all the time to
Right.
compare, you know, what they'll save over the 25 years versus what DT is gonna jack you around.
that's right. It's a spreadsheet, it's a PowerPoint presentation, it's a pie chart, and it's a graph. And we show that to the owners and they get it usually after that.
Do most builders, you are utilizing those kinds of tools?
No, Jake's doing it, I'm doing it. There's probably one, maybe two other builders in the county that are dabbling with it.
And these
And
are
everybody
spreadsheets
else
that
is-
you've created or you've
Yes.
gotten from DOE, like
No,
EV bots?
ones that we've created. Because we're speaking directly to our customers, so we will really want to personalize it for them, you know, based on what their interests are. But at this point in time, we're in design and we know a little bit more about them, so we're able to create something that
Do you know,
speaks to them.
do you know if there's any kind of a publicly available spreadsheet that consumers could play with before they make decisions?
I don't. And for us too, it depends on where the client is in their life stage, if they've got kids or if they're empty nesters. So some of those things will differ in terms of what their long-term visions are.
One final question.
Sure.
This is completely off the wall. If there was funding available from the state of Michigan to develop some type of spreadsheet which would be available for customers, would you and maybe some of your other colleagues that have developed spreadsheets be willing to work with the state of Michigan? to
Oh, sure.
develop Such a
Sure.
thing?
Absolutely. I think that's, you know, the reason why we're in this, and Michael touches on it practically every time he speaks, you know, is to pass on a better world, you know, for our kids and grandkids. So,
Rock on, Michael.
you know, that's it. So.
Everyone in this room.
How much did you pay these guys to play plugging you?
So can I
Not
make a
enough.
cost savings suggestion?
Sure.
Or maybe an opportunity for some discussion. So again, as a mechanical contractor, and we've been around high performance homes, so we know how they perform. Other than when we did the, you know, the Living Building Challenge home, there were a lot of unknowns there in terms of the process, right? So we stuck with that for 3.5 years through development and then construction. And to get more contractors on board, whether it's a mechanical contractor, electrician, you have this world of unknowns for the contractor, right? So anytime there's an unknown for a contractor and they give you a fixed bid for your project, which is really tough today, as you know, as costs are going, you know where I'm going, is what happens is you get the factor put in there that says, I don't know what's gonna happen, so I've gotta cover myself profitability wise, right? Because you want us to be there to maintain that system down the road for the client. So the thing is we have highly skilled labor doing menial tasks to accomplish the goals on certifications, right? So you might be paying labor rates of $75 or $85 a man hour for a task that you could have some multidisciplined site laborers that either work for you or come in from some other pool, an educational pool where you're tying into some community resources.
Talking about like duct sealing.
Duct sealing, some of the menial stuff,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
that can then take your labor costs
Sure.
down. And it takes away the variable for the contractor to say, I gotta pad this,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So we want these projects and we want more traction. Like we're in an industry that's 1 or 2% of the market in heat pumps, right?
Yeah.
We want it to be 40 and 50 and 100% of the market.
Yeah.
But, and I'm talking about the community is HVAC, they're afraid of it. They're still afraid of it. And so we have to try as a community of builders, other HVAC people, help educate them and take away some of that mystery until they can get their feet under them and feel comfortable bidding it right,
Yeah.
not just building it right, but bidding it
No,
right.
one of
So-
the things that we've had to do lately is I see your bid, I see the fear in your bid. Let's go time and material because I know it's gonna be less.
Yes,
Because there's a lot of fear.
and I even have business partners that are afraid of that time and material conversation, and I'm on
Right.
board with you.
Yeah.
To say, yeah, let's just do it, here's a time lock,
Yeah,
It's easy.
exactly.
it's easy math.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, my wife and I, we actually ended up going with geothermal instead of, we're going between geothermal and an air source heat pump, a mini split. And,
You made the right choice.
well, it actually, we always wanted to do geothermal, or like, the data's there. This is like an amazing system, especially in Michigan with our climate. And the biggest thing that helped tip us is the tax credit for doing the system, which is of course phasing out now. But as Brett brought up, like advocating for our future with whoever we can, like, and mentioning the state of Michigan providing resources for people, like that's really one of the biggest resources that we relied on in order to achieve our net zero goals. And in regards to the duct sealing, we just had the project bid regularly. And my wife and I were down there with a bucket of mastic and some rubber gloves, and we just sealing everything, checking every little joint, making sure all the tape's wrapped all the way around and stuff. And it actually, we had our ducts tested twice, once after our first pass mastic and then once after a second, and we couldn't believe the difference that made. I mean, just a little bit is like cutting down 2 or 3 extra returns worth of leakage.
How big is your property, if you don't mind my asking it, your ability to put geothermal in there?
Yeah, the lot itself, it's tiny. It's 60 by 160. And we did 3 vertical wells in the back, 150 feet down. And then, so it took up, a line, there's 20 feet or 10 feet apart, and then that's all we needed. Once we got the equipment back there and then tied in.
It's more of a comment. I mean, you bring up an interesting conversation because the tax credit, from my understanding, is more meant to offset the cost of that
Yes.
initial grid, which you don't have to do subsequently in future change outs. And part of, building code as we look forward, if there's a way to work in, just like a utility, that becomes your utility under the ground of having a home geo ready, then you can see people making more even decisions.
Right.
Because you don't have to put in a different utility for it.
Yeah, exactly. We know that's there for life.
Right.
We've found in communities or developments where they've done the loop as a part of the lot price and made the home geo ready, and through deed restrictions, they want to force geothermal communities. So they say no outdoor air condensers, no propane tanks, those types of things. But when you put the loop price in the cost of the dirt, it disappears because people want to build their home where they want to build their home, right? If that's the cost of dirt, that's the cost of dirt, but it comes with their energy source.
right,
And it's also the lowest form of
It's only-
finance
yeah.
for it as well.
Right.
sure,
All right.
sure.
Yep.
100%. And that's where we could group together. I think, Brett talked about what can we do collectively. We can work with our state legislators and even at the Washington DC level to, try to protect some of these tax credits from the solar and the geothermal and from energy efficient building.
And
And as well as,
Virginia and talk to Mr. Manchin then.
yeah, well, as well as the rates too. I know that we just had to put in an application in Northville for 18 kilowatt system that they had to give us feedback to decide if it wasn't too much solar on the house. And so now they're actually starting to restrict, and this is from DTE, restrict how much solar they're going to allow people to put on their homes, which I find to be a little bit of a dangerous and slippery territory to be in without them being 100% renewable. So until they're at 100% renewable, I don't think they should be restricting anybody.
It's worse than that.
Yeah.
The solar team once made a presentation to our group, and I asked them how many of the members of the solar team had solar in their house. 0.
Yeah. Well, there's a mission. Did you have something to say about that? It sounds like
Yeah, I've been going through this for my own home journey. I'm with DTE. I I'm on their
On
electric
DTE,
grid,
okay.
I'm not with
You don't work for them. Okay.
But I found that I
I'm in
wanted,
DT.
oh,
Oh,
I found that I had to spend about an hour on the phone with customer service, getting them to understand what my questions were. And I had to wait about 3 days for an interconnection engineer to call me back. And because I want to put my heat pump in first, I need to make sure my costs are low. And the only way to do that is to put my air source heat pump or my geothermal on one of their separate meters.
yeah.
And because that is a separate meter, they said I cannot size my solar array to include my whole home's usage
Right.
and my heat pump usage,
Right.
even though it's all mastered back
Right,
to the same address.
right.
So I have to,
They're struggling.
yep, so I'll tell you what I have to do. I can use the interruptible cool currents meter.
Yep.
Have about 12 cents a kilowatt hour on my heating rate,
Yep.
which is where I need it to be for it to be affordable electric heat in the state of Michigan. And I can then, when my solar, I'm ready to put my solar panels on, because I have to stage it for affordability, right? Just like you're having to do with yours. I can take my interruptible meter off and then combine everything back onto one rate. So now I have to pay more expensive cost for my electricity for my heat pump, but I can at least then size my solar array to include my heat pump. It's a.
Are you sure you want to do that? Because there's a
And-
30% deduction for the geothermal, and that's a big use.
You tell Haley Mechanical to go ahead and add a
I will.
geothermal system to my quote, and I'll pick one of the 30.
I'd want to see the economics. I don't.
One of the things
Well, the
that-
other point is that the investment tax credit is gonna go down to 22% January 1st.
Right.
So get it 26% right now.
Yeah.
But how are they doing it on new construction? Because on new construction, we're allowed to estimate kilowatts based on the data, based on software we use to, estimate energy consumption on mechanicals, and then, other mathematics for lighting and other base load. But they're not allowing you to
They
use
will
the
not.
same
They
mathematics.
will not allow an existing customer.
And we could
to do
actually convert your energy consumption on your
Yeah,
gas
my
consumption
BTUs
to
to KWH,
KWH.
yep.
Right.
To say, this is where I'm currently at, knowing that you will be
Yeah.
Yeah.
better likely than
If I
that.
was allowed to do that, they said that at a minimum, the solar installer has said that I would have to have like a purchase agreement already for the heat pump for them to allow me to do that. Because they don't believe that I would. put-
Sign a contingent one.
Yeah.
Contingent bond.
They basically are saying that they don't trust that I would actually put in the heat pump.
Yeah, so DTE is a step behind on where we are in this room and what we're trying to do.
Probably more
And they're not sure how to deal with that. I
That's
had a
being kind.
customer.
That's being very kind.
I had a customer that had on Sunset here in Ann Arbor, geothermal, with solar. And the first month they moved in, they got a bill from DTE for $29,000 because DTE had lost track of where their meter was spinning and assumed based on other data that that's where their bill would be at, and it was on auto draw. And
Oh
it tried
my
to draw it out
God.
of his checking account. And so that just kind of is like where DTE is right now with all of this, we have houses that we've got 60,000 kilowatts of battery power, geothermal, and 18 kW of solar. And it took a year to kind of figure out how to get all of this to work with the loads and, bypassing the geothermal because the startup on the geo is so high that it can't run on the solar. And one of the things that we've concluded is that it's a lot easier for everybody at the end of the day to go to just do one meter
Yep.
instead of the split meter. So,
But just the one thing, DT is the only utility in the IOU in the country that has a separate rate for geothermal, a lower rate. There's no other utility in the country that does
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I always point to, I didn't know it was no other in the country, but I always,
No.
I get jealous here on Consumers Grid where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't you all do a geothermal rate like DT? I always point to them and sort of hold them
great.
up.
Yeah,
I didn't know
I
the
didn't know
solar
that
aspect.
either. I didn't know that either when I created it.
It's a real mess. And like that applies to like if you're on the EV meter as well, like that.
Yeah, that's another, I have 3 meters, yeah.
You could have 8 different meters in a residential home
Right,
on DTE's current rate structure.
right, which is ridiculous.
So they give you
Customer
a
service
cheaper
can
rate for
explain one of
EVs
them.
only because it's on another meter.
Right.
Yeah,
wanna
it's a,
buy
it's a time, it's a time, I'm sure it's also tied to time.
What's the credit,
Right,
what's the
yeah.
credit value
It-
now?
It varies.
What's their buyback?
I don't know DTE's buyback amount. I'm sorry, I work for Michigan's Electric
I'm
Cooperative.
curious, because I know that there's been some discussion
Yeah,
about
they-
it
they're
not even
bad.
being
DTE
half.
is
It's not
really
enough.
bad at
It's
that.
not any,
It's like a
like-
third
Yeah,
of what,
it's-
I would
what they
say
sell a
maybe-
Talking
kilowatt.
about the,
It's like
the
6.5
rate for
cents
putting
possibly.
energy back on the grid.
Yeah,
Yes.
distributed
Well,
generation.
currently 50% of the retail rate.
Yeah, so
But there's a
6,
current proposal
8
to
cents
make it
about?
locational
6.
marginal price,
yes,
which is around 3.5 cents. And that's my real comment about DTE, that it's a huge organization, so no doubt the bureaucracy's got everything screwed up regarding
sure,
some of these individual examples. By putting aside the uniqueness of what Larry is talking about, DTE is doing everything they possibly can to maintain their monopoly and to slow down the transition to renewable energy.
Yep.
I mean, they're politically are doing everything to gum things up in the Public Service Commission as well as the state legislature.
Right.
So.
right,
Well, the rate
And
was.
they
es-
don't want to risk losing their gas customers. In this area, if you are a DTE customer, you are their gas customer and their electric
Right.
customer, and they don't want to see you go to the electric side. only.
yet DTE has a pilot program for all electric homes.
Right.
Yeah,
Because they have,
promoting it.
they're state mandated to have that pilot program.
They
Yeah,
are.
the CEO came from the gas side. So
See, that's why where all this changed. I came to the state in 1990 and I was working for a distributor or manufacturer of geothermal at the time. And we worked really hard with DTE in formation of the D 1.7 rate. So I've been around this rate for 30 years. And the whole point is that they were competing with Mishcon at the time before they acquired Mishcon.
Right.
And so there was a competitive environment. And now, because of the state legislation and rules of the MPSC, you can't promote fuel switching. So now they have this internal conflict that should be addressed.
Right.
And that's the problem, is you can't have, like you said, they've got you coming and going, right? Either way, they have you. So where's their incentive to do right by the customers and promote technologies that are right for the community,
Right,
right?
Well, the incentive is if the legislature would force them to do it.
that's right,
Yeah.
that's where it's
And
gonna
that's
come
why
from.
the election this fall is so critical.
Sure.
If the governor had at least one additional branch of government, then we could actually start moving stuff.
Right,
Yeah, well, I wanna, this is a great conversation, I think, to speak to the advocacy role and really where you know, builders are building, and many of you who are listening in, probably building all over the country. So you're all sort of at the mercy of whatever's given to you, your utility structure. And I think it's a good point to where you can say, look, this is what we can do. What can we do to work with our utilities, legislative bodies? So what we're building makes sense. And what's in the way of net zero? Like, how do we knock it down? How do we make things easier to have these conversations? So I think it was a good conversation to have. And I want to kind of take us back kind of to the specifics. And I think there's a lot that you all had gave me on this question that came up here. And this is really just, what is your systems approach to building to net zero or getting net zero ready as far as the envelope, right? We talk about weatherization, we talk about electrification through the mechanical systems, and then we talk about solarization through the renewables. So the question kind of is, you know, what approaches are you using? Let's get into some specific details. I know we've kind of went through a lot of them already, but let's just hammer on them a little bit more, go into some more specifics on just what you're seeing and what you're doing there from a technical standpoint.
Can I have a bit of, there's a contextual question here that might help this, but what is the difference between passive home and net zero? I think it's kind of good to explain the difference there so that you're referring to passive home and versus net zero. So it'd be good to kind of in your response to kind of reference that as well.
Yeah, in the context of these systems that you're doing, you know, how do you understand them through the lens of the certifications? Like, I think Jake, you were making some really good points, like, hey, if we're doing a certification, that's the goal. But if we're not, then it's maybe the budget or the diminishing returns piece. So what's the difference there with passive house and how does that fit in with these approaches? So I'll hand it to you, Dave.
Yeah, sure. So our approach started with the design, and that's kind of where a lot of passive house principles come into. What can you do to minimize your your energy footprint without, electricity, without utilities and stuff like that, and solar panels. Like, what can you do first to reduce that? So lots of windows on the south for solar heating in the winter, but then overhangs so that you don't have the solar heating in the summer. And so a lot of that, when we went to the design, we were like, okay, what do we need to do to actually given to us from the sun, and also based on the site and trees, what foliage can we take advantage of in the summer? And so that was kind of like the start of it. What can we do to reduce it passively? And then from there, then what can we do to get this energy efficient, tight envelope? And then to get to the net zero, that's when you bring in, okay, what do we need to do mechanically to get us the rest of the way? So we have insulation all the way around every side under the slab in the basement, comes up the foundation walls, and then up the walls and then in the attic. And so we did ICF foundation, so you already have the EPS on both sides of the concrete. We did 6 inches of EPS underneath the basement slab. And then for the above grade walls, we have 4 inches of EPS on the outside, and then 2x6 wall, 24 on center with rock wool, which that was a product I really enjoyed working with. I've done a lot of like batt insulation and just trying to cut it and staple it and do a good job. We found as homeowners and people that have never worked with it before, it was a lot easier to work with the rock wool and do a good job. And so you can see the picture on the right, you have the rock wool in the cavity, and then we did XPS as part of the header assembly, just to get a little bit more insulation there. The picture on the top left, we have this really deep window box to get the window outside of the assembly as much as possible, but then structurally, but then you can still put that EPS there, which you can see in the top middle. You can see the difference between the zip sheathing, which we use as our main air barrier to get the to get the lowest lower door score, which we actually just did. We got a 0.94, so we're pretty happy with that. And then we also wanted to minimize the amount of spray foam we did. So we only did spray foam kind of here just to strengthen the baffles in the attic, and then just along the rim joists. And that was the only spray foam we did. And then we did blown in cellulose for all the attic spaces.
Can I ask a question? So you have the zip-R sheething, the tape, but then the one below that picture, you have tie-back wrap.
Yeah, that's
So-
just a belt and suspenders kind of situation where just to prevent any extra moisture from getting to that zip layer, since there are a lot of seams in the EPS, we did wrap it with Tyvek before installing the furring strips for the mainspring.
Okay, so there's nothing between the tie-back and the zip-R.
There's the 4 inches of EPS.
Only the 4 inches of EPS on the outside of the zip-R sheeting.
Yes.
And then the tie-back.
Now, is that zip R sheathing or
No,
zip
it's
sheathing?
just regular zip sheathing.
Just zip sheathing, not the.
Yeah,
So it's not zip-R, it's just zip sheeting.
Right, yeah,
Oh,
the zip-R has that
Yeah.
layer of insulation inside of it. Total wall, our value is around 40, around our 40. Then we did R60 attic.
You did seal the seams on the 4-inch EPS, right?
No, just on the zip. Yes, so we seem to seal those seams on the zip.
And then wrapped it with Tyvek.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a.
Yeah, I mean, the
Storm
bigger
water.
gaps, we did spray foam just to
Yeah.
prevent a little bit of air getting.
How did you attach it to the zip sheeting?
Really long screws. Yeah, I have little 6-inch screws with a
Yeah,
a
the
2-inch
base.
washer on it, just to hold it in place. And then when we screw in the furring strips, that's really what kind of sandwiches it against the wall.
And no glue.
No glue, right. You know, you try to avoid adhesives as much as possible.
From a system standpoint, we've been building
high efficiency, sustainable homes for 25 years. So we've done everything from whole ICF houses. ICF basements are nice when the budget allows for them. We've done structural insulating panel wall systems, walls and roof. We have an extensive history with that, and along with timber frame construction. SIP panels work great with timber framing for their span capabilities. Plus they're really airtight, and you can, and you have a lot less thermal breaks from that kind of more of an older technology. We do a lot, before the zip sheeting came out, we did a lot of installing a layer of 1 inch or 2 inch foam over the outside of regular OSB. As kind of to get the exterior insulation. That exterior thermal break is a big factor in any type of construction from a performance standpoint. And then now we're into doing all of these. This is a plan view from the passive house over in Birmingham. And that wall system is actually a double stud wall system with 2 2x4 stud walls. The interior stud wall is the load bearing stud wall, and that has the zip sheeting applied to that. And everything is taped. Any nail that goes into that, we caulk every dab, every nail head, everything. Any joint that is seamed, any wall to roof seam or any floor system seams, that's all caulked with the zip liquid flash, which is basically a rubber. Yes.
Over your plating, separate 2x4 wall.
Correct.
Or separate.
Yes. Yep. It's like, so it's basically a double stud wall that's a foot wide. So from the inside to the outside, it's 12 inches. Your inside wall, you have your 4-inch cavity. Your zip is attached to that. Then you have an 8-inch cavity on the outside of that, and that's filled with dense packed fiberglass. And then that all planes out with the ICF foundation below. So that wall actually overhangs your foundation 2 inches. The outside wall does. So then that flushes out with 2-inch XPS foam that's over the ICF. So the ICF wall, it's your ICF. You have 2 inches of insulation on the outside. Then you still have a stud wall on the inside of that with more dense packed fiberglass in there. So the foundation wall ends up being 16 inches thick by the time you're done, and then it tapers up to a 12-inch wall on the outside. You can see it in this wall section here, to where you have your double stud wall, and then kind of similar to what Jamie had and his. We actually made a window buck frame out of plywood that transitioned through both of the wall assemblies. And then that allows us to set the windows inside of that wall based off of where the architect says, here's your optimum location for that window to be for proper air ventilation or airfall across that. So that helps the condensation on the glass and different things like that. And then also, every one of those seams and everything is taped, it's caulked, so it's very labor intensive. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's like an onion. There's a million layers to do in this wall system, but it performs very well. When we had a couple weeks ago, when it was like 90 every day for a week, that house was 70 in there from it being cooler the previous week, and it stayed cool the whole time. So you could actually blow fans from the basement kind of up the stairwell and kind of move the cooler basement air up into this house with no mechanical systems in whatsoever, and it was performing exceptionally well. But from a wall system standpoint, it really comes down to, are we doing a high performance value engineered setup, or are we doing a certified project where if it's like an LBC house where we have to care and know about every single material that's going down there to a chemical level, or if it's a passive house where we're trying to be pre-certified like this house is, and working with architects and engineers to hit all those values that are needed for that wall and roof assembly. So, yes.
Could you just, I don't know, I'm wondering like the cost of certification versus just the cost of building a high performance home that's not certified. Like, is there any way to put a number on that kind of difference for a homeowner?
Not really. Any project budget is based off of 3 factors. You have the complexity. So, and then this is, when you're doing a certified house versus high performing, you have a major multitude of complexity factors on it. So you have the complexity, you have the size, and then the content. And that kind of goes down to what this gentleman here was talking about in regards to granite countertops and cherry floors and things like that. to where your major budget factor at about 70% of any construction budget is gonna be the infrastructure. Around 30% is like the finishes on the inside. So
But does the certification help a real estate person price the house easier once the owner wants to sell their house?
no, because like the houses like myself and Mike build, I'm constantly working with appraisers and banks on helping them understand what's the difference between this 2,000 square foot house that costs $200,000 more than the 2,000 square foot house built right next to it by a spec builder. That's all code minimal. So I'm constantly always trying to talk to the appraisers and everything and say, these are the premium items that we have in here. And it's not a premium as in for mica tops versus quartz tops. It's like the investment that you're putting into the home and trying to help them understand, okay, all this extra foam and all this extra items we're putting in like geothermal or ducted mini split systems that come at a premium. Here's the value you're actually getting out of it.
I understand that, but if the house is certified and you're off, and you move to a different state, and that person wants to put the house up for sale, if they present their certification, isn't that almost like proof that this house is a high efficiency home? And that will be easier for the appraiser to market it higher?
It's proof, but it has to deal with the person buying the house that they assess, that they place value on that certification. If they don't care about the certification, they may not want to pay more
No, I understand
for that house.
It's the tip of the iceberg. Everybody below it has to recognize it to make it valid, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we can convince them, but the appraisers have to recognize it.
Yeah.
Put it in the books and somebody has to pay for it.
There
And then it starts to build.
There are appraiser groups that are now starting to look at value of high performance sustainable homes. And, we have ambitions of being able to say, let's say, for example, this home is, LEED certified or LEED platinum is going to garnish a 13%, premium on a house that comps out at that same size with the same number of square foot bathrooms and bedrooms, with similar amenities. So that it's a matter of getting the data. So we just don't have enough data to make it where it's completely widely acceptable. We have more data than we had 10 years ago, but it's still in the works in terms of actually becoming more of a legitimate tool that appraisers can use, because appraisers are kind of really strapped for accountability after the market crash in 2008, where they were appraising homes without any justification. So now their liability meter has shot up where, anything, it needs to be vetted, and it needs to be, there needs to be a precedence for it. So I feel that, within the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more value placed on homes that are certified, because they're going to start changing hands as well. The people that built them are still living in them over the course of the last 10 years. So they're waiting for their kids to graduate from school and downsize or move on, and we'll see more of those homes enter into the market as well.
Our energy efficient mortgage is still on the books. I know 10, 15 years ago, there was a movement there where certain lenders were recognizing the total cost of ownership, including that utility bill, in their evaluation of how much they would lend on a home. Are there any lenders that are recognizing that part of the value, at least now?
Again, it rolls back to the appraiser who appraises the value, but there are some that talk the talk a little bit, but it has not become a mainstream comment. This is gospel. So it's still a work in progress.
Do customers recognize that the building code is the minimum? Or do they think that's the?
They don't. Is that
When we
general?
Seriously,
We have to bring it up. They generally don't. They generally don't come to us. Is there anybody else?
Are you tracking after?
Tracking
The performance.
Tracking the performance. That's a great question. We do ask for utility. See how the house is performing. We haven't done a deep dive on it where we're tracking it, and keeping spreadsheets. It's more of an interest in terms of, okay, what did we use in that house? How is it performing? And, we could take a base metric like, cost per square foot to heat or cool this house. But with each summer having different high points and each winter having different low points, you have to really dig in deep to get real fine info. So yes and no. I mean, I track it, but not diligently.
But
We don't have the time to
Does
do
your
it.
spreadsheet have appliances on it, where you, if you look at the electric bill, you're gonna see the effect of the appliance selection. Right? So do you predict that side of the energy use?
We don't, but when we do a solar calculator to determine what load they're going to require to get to net zero, we plug in what the different load estimates are for the different appliances. There are a few products on the market actually that you can plug into your main breaker panel and will tell you what you're drawing on different appliances in the house, which I think is fantastic. I have one in my house and it tells me number of kilowatts for every appliance in my really helpful tool. They're about $300 on Amazon, but they're very intuitive. They can detect the vibration of different appliances, and then it can tell you, toaster's on and it's drawing this much, or the washer, the dryer.
I have a question. When you're talking about like the zip wall and things like that, what about the outgassing? There was a time where particle boards, the houses were so toxic. And like for you personally, when you and your wife are in the home, are you smelling the particle board, the glues or anything like that?
No, I mean, we did try to minimize glues and we did think about the VOC content of paints and anything we used. But then we also have an ERV. So the whole house has controlled ventilation that we're constantly running. So we're always, exhausting the air and bringing in fresh air. And so it's just being there, even just working in there, it feels like the cleanest air we've ever been in a house.
On that topic, there are some very affordable indoor air quality monitors that homeowners can apply to their homes and just track their VOCs, their particulate matter count and so forth. So
that's a great segue.
When I hear the word particle board, I think it's from 20 years ago, but I still cringe.
Yeah, sure, because it's got glue in it.
And formaldehyde, but I know they keep improving.
They do, and creating better low VOC products, including paint. So one of the questions that was asked earlier was the difference between passive house and net zero. So that's a good segue for it because net zero is focused solely on energy use. Passive house focuses on energy use and indoor air quality. So those are two different certifications rolled into one. They don't do a whole lot on, water conservation. There's not, a lot on where is it located and its access to public resources like LEED. The passive house certification is focused on the building envelope and the mechanical load and the energy efficiency of the home and the indoor air quality, because we're making a super tight home with no penetrations. And they do allow, for example, a recirculating indoor hood for your oven and stove. Whereas in LEED certification, they actually require you to have an indoor recirculating hood to get those gases and that smoke out of the kitchen, because they're leaning more towards the fact that people will burn stuff in the house that could become toxic after burning, which needs to be expelled from the home. So all the different certifications have weight in different areas, but primarily the energy efficiency is the net zero is kind of the model for energy efficiency when you're just focusing on high performance in that regard. And net zero, to achieve, they do have a set of hurdles that you have to abide by that starts with your slab in your basement and your foundation and the amount of R value that you have in those walls. And then, you know, there's a duct test, there's a blower door test, there's above grade insulation, metrics that get factored in, your windows, doors. So there's, you know, a good, I would say, you know, 15 to 20 different bullet points that you have to adhere to hit that net zero ready certification. Sure.
You know, as I listen to the conversations, and this, Rob and I were talking a little bit about this, but you know, any new technology that comes out it comes out expensive, right?
Mhm.
And you have to have people who are willing to put that kind of money into it. But in this group, one of the things Brett mentioned earlier is what's the barrier to net zero? And to me, you know, if I look at it, we're looking at, I mean, at the most 10% of the people that could afford to do some of these things. But if we're not measuring it, if we don't know what it costs to put, you know, a piece of foam over a header, you know, or a header, or, you know, or if we don't know what effect that really has, we'll never get down to where it's affordable. It's Abby, right? It's for a project where you can get 60-70% of the population who's building and or, you know, people building multi-family to be able to afford that. And that's where the measurement, I thought that question was so great, is how are we measuring what these things are doing?
Yeah, I
How
think,
would we
you know,
measure
a
it?
study, I would think, a study could be done where they could just basically take a 2,000 square foot home, a 3,000 square foot home, maybe one is a ranch, one is a 2-story, one has a basement, one doesn't. Run all those through the cost calculator at built to code, and then run them through the cost calculator built to net zero standards. And then see what kind of differences you come up with those 8 different types of homes that you have in your study. And then we start to get a little bit of an idea of what that difference is to get to net zero. Is it 10, 15, 20%? There's so many decisions that go into designing and building a home. You know, there's 50,000 parts and pieces. And so the trade-offs that an owner could justify and give up that hardwood flooring for maybe a luxury vinyl, and give up, you know, that granite countertop for maybe something that's a little bit, you know, less expensive but durable. Cabinets, fiberglass showers in lieu of tile, linoleum in lieu of tile in wet areas. It just goes on and on and on. Recessed lighting versus decorative lighting. There's so many ways to trade off your costs of building if you're going to put it into that energy efficiency component. We'd like to think that, you know, that really helps to bring down the cost, but not everybody's willing to do that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to send the wrong message, because it's necessary to have, you know, we're going to be building homes, you know, for different,
right,
you know, income levels and stuff like that, you know, for the in the future. So I'm just saying it'd be great to learn, because other technologies we learn how to bring that into the mainstream. You know, and building, I think that,
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, for us, we are very fortunate because people are willing to partner with us often. And so a huge asset to us has been actually universities and colleges. So on this past one, we call our London build, our first all electric home, we partnered with Calvin College and asked them, hey, will you study this home and give us the data so that we know how is it performing and how can we do it better and where are we seeing those returns and where aren't we? And so we actually compared it against 2 other houses of the exact same model built within the last 5 years that had a gas furnace and that were a traditional home. And I'd say additionally, you know, for us, we go after rebate programs frequently, so through consumers, and a lot of those have the stipulation where you have to monitor the home and see how it's performing. So I know in one of our last ones, and I don't have great data on this, but they came out and put a monitoring system within the home that's then measuring how it is performing and what it's doing.
Consumers or Calvin?
So this was, no, Calvin did not put a monitoring system. This one was through DTE, and a lot of times they use, you know, like a third party, and it was through that, and it was a company out of Chicago, and they came out and put this monitoring system in a home to measure how it's performing.
How was it that Calvin was interested in doing at least one house that we're interested in monitoring. How did that come about?
Well, it was in their engineering department. It was their thermal design office. And they take on the project each year. And so I approached the professor and he came up with the idea for the project. Fantastic.
Because Calvin was in the news for another item, which is they used a model where they didn't have to put out any money whatsoever to a solar company. They came in and put this monster solar system in, and then the savings, of course, will help them, I guess, pay off the cost of installing the system. So I got a lot of press this week. So I just think it's interesting, the coincidence. And is it your home?
That is, no, but I work at Habitat, but that is one of their core values.
Really?
Yeah, and that's not a unique situation, you know, we have a Habitat conference that I went to and met another affiliate where they had kind of done the same thing and partnered, and the university studied it and then also came out and actually installed solar panels on the home, so we're like really involved. So I would say that could even be a potentially an avenue for you guys where,
100%.
you know, who knows what kind of.
Well, we built, and I believe Bob built one a little while back on Burbeck, the Trom wall. And that's something that we'd really be excited to find out how it is performing over the course of a year or two, because all I can do is take an infrared camera and get a temperature reading on the surface of the Trom wall. On the coldest day of the year in 2018 February, there was that polar vortex that came through, and it was about, I think it was about 10 below at 5 o'clock at night, and the wall was 98.9 degrees on the inside of the house. It was a super sunny day, super cold, sunny winter day in February, and the wall was 98 degrees inside the house. It was a concrete block wall, core filled, in front of a big set of windows, and it's this big thermal battery. And you know, people ask all the time, well, you know, what did it cost to build it, and you know, what's the payoff? I don't know. I know it works. I know it's warm and it stays warm through the night, and it doesn't really start to diminish its heat until morning. So it's holding that solar radiation for a good 10 to 12 hours and giving off heat in the house throughout the day as well. So that would be something that we would really love to be able to study and see, put a number on it for sure.
And what's really important about that specific comment to me is because our geothermal system in that home is third fiddle to comfort.
Yeah.
First is it's passive.
Right.
Second is the Trom.
Yep.
If they need something, the geothermal runs.
Right.
But it goes back to mechanical code, is that we were not allowed to take the value of those other items in our system design. They said, well, if these don't exist, you need X in terms of a system size. And so that.
And that's because you don't know how many,
system,
it's because you don't know how many sunny days you're going to get in winter.
Right. But with data over time.
Right.
Now we can start to affect change in code.
Sure.
To say, we know that, and maybe we give it 50% of what we think it can do.
Yeah.
At least it's something, right?
Just
I could go to a
something.
3 instead of a 4, or a 2 instead of a 3.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's the drawback about being involved in all this early, is that we're creating the data basically for the next generation to study.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any advances in development or establishment of eco districts or green neighborhood sort of efforts to educate and track data on a consolidated scale?
Green neighborhoods, there's one going up in Ann Arbor that Matt Grokos working on, that they're going to be looking at a lot of that. You know, in the urban areas, it's hard to find land to be able to do the green neighborhoods.
And of course, if you have a green neighborhood, it's easier to collect data.
Sure.
But I say, what do you have, a sensor on your system?
Yes.
Yeah, and I have one too.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to collect that data. I think the GreenHome Institute should try to initiate a project where you can actually see the number of minutes. I mean, when my furnace starts, you can see the current draw of the igniter.
Yep.
Right? You see the motor start.
Live, real time.
Right.
Yep.
And so if you have an all electric home, you can see every one of those devices when it comes on. And at the end of the year, you can say, how many minutes did the motor on my furnace run? Oh, every minute that it runs, it takes this many BTUs. Then you insulate the ceiling or you do something else.
Right.
I was in a house in Ypsilanti on Wednesday for home inspection. the seat, one part of the house had 24-inch center rafters. And there was R13 16-inch batten insulation
Laid up there.
rafters, okay? Now, is that an insulated ceiling? To a realtor, there's insulation up there.
Sure.
okay? So I think that a good project would be to get us, you don't have to have a green community. You can find interested people, or you can find houses that you built.
Right.
Ask permission to just monitor the energy consuming things, the stuff that's not discretionary. I mean, how many loads of does your dryer run? That's discretionary heat use.
Mhm.
You can wear your clothes differently in different families.
Right.
And how many towels do you use? Different in different families.
Right.
But the furnace, the air conditioner, the air exchange system that comes on appropriately, those are all behind the scenes, and they're about how well the house is built. And if we don't have that data, it's because we haven't focused on the idea that it can be available on from the cloud.
Or that it's
But you have to add what temperature a person keeps their house at. That
And
varies.
you think your Nest or Ecobee thermostat doesn't tell you? can't
No,
tell
but
you
I'm
that?
just saying, some people run their houses at 68, some people run their houses at 78. That's gonna make a huge difference.
Long hot showers, short warm showers.
And actually, it can be easily standardized because there's data all over the internet for any, you can go and pull down. So if you said, well, there were some hot days, some cold days. That data is, that historical data is up there. It tells you how many heating days. Or how many cooling days. Based on, you can set it based on whatever standard you want.
Totally agree, yeah.
So the data is there. So
Yeah.
you have to commit to it. So maybe, I think what I'm hearing is maybe as a suggestion on the projects that you're doing, that ought to be part of it. You ought to commit to sharing the data.
Commit to sharing their data and make it easy and then get it to somebody who's not, who just focuses on crunching data and getting information. Yeah. It's a great idea.
Isn't there a TV show at the moment, a home renovation show that's based in Detroit? I've never
Rehab
watched it,
addict,
but they're doing those
or you
story and a half houses that Ipsy has miles of them, and Inkster has miles of them, and Tecumseh has a lot of them, and they all need rehabilitation, and they're all built exactly the same.
Are you talking about the brothers or the two guys?
Not the brothers,
Okay.
but there's another show, I've never watched it, but I've seen the ads for it, where they're going through Detroit neighborhoods and actually shaking these story and a half and, rehabbing.
Well, they live in them as a rehab,
Oh, do
right?
they?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's the case.
Yeah.
But
There's
we
a,
could tie
there's a
into one of
big
those.
need for a lot of rehab to hit certain metrics in this, because that inventory of housing is vast and the leakage on those houses is enormous amount of energy just being blown out into the open. You had a question in the very back?
Yeah, well, it's more a comment. I think, you can make all the envelope improvements and mechanical efficiencies you want to. But if the homeowner doesn't know how to use that stuff.
Right.
you still run into a situation where. Right there, I open up the window, oh, it's cold in here, crank it up.
Right. Yeah.
And if they don't know what's happening.
Right.
You're not getting anywhere. So I think for particularly for Abby, with the habitat, new homeowners.
Little education.
Affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's gotta be a piece of.
A homeowner education course, like driver's training.
Or fail to do it. If you don't understand.
Michael?
So this kind of cycles back to the challenges, but when we're talking about envelope, Jake, do you want to share what we ran into with the inspection?
Yeah, actually, we had our installation inspection yesterday for the interior portion of the wall system. And the inspector initially failed it because he was thinking that all the dense packed fiberglass in there required a vapor barrier on the inside of the studs. Which I called Michael and was like, what's going on here? And we looked in the code and he showed that, when you have the continuous insulation on the outside of a 2x4 stud wall, as long as it's R5 or more, then you don't have to have a vapor barrier on the inside of your stud wall. And you can, then that allows you, it qualifies for what is a class 3 vapor retarder. And that's basically latex paint.
So there's just dealing with even the building inspectors. I was gonna mention this, I was gonna bring that up earlier when you were talking about code stuff. Even when you're doing these high performing walls and stuff that's new, we have to even now educate them. This is what the code says we can do, and it's fine, it's right. We don't have to put another layer of vapor control in there. We already have one in there in the middle of the wall system. And that would have, like, for all intents and purposes, ruined our wall if they were just gonna stick to, you have to have a vapor barrier. That would have been not great.
That is the danger, because they don't know that they're gonna make that worse. That's gonna be a poorly performing. wall.
Yeah.
Some
And
dangers
it's gonna
there,
create
that's the
a mold and poison problem too.
Yeah.
Traffic moisture.
So we ran into that issue. I called the building official, went through the code with him, and he contacted the inspector, and I got the email later that afternoon that it was approved. So,
So one thing that I'd like to comment on, because I think that there's gonna be a lot of this happening in the future. And one of the questions that Brett had asked us, to speak to is what we thought the future holds for construction and home building. And I got the opportunity to go to Sweden a couple of years ago and visit some places where they're building homes indoors and then shipping them to the site, assembling them. And in terms of affordability, because the custom home will always require architects and stick builders to build the custom homes that are more expensive. But in terms of your 1,800 square foot, 2-story, 900 square foot footprint home, being affordable and energy efficient, I firmly believe that that's where they're going to come from. In Sweden, this house would arrive in a truck with a big canopy apron. The crane was on site. They pulled the wall sections out, laid them, set them on the slab in a little channel that the bottom plate would hold onto and lock right in place. The walls had drywall insulation, windows, siding, all pre-installed on the wall, ready to go. They left a couple service cavities open for electrical, plumbing, and mechanical. And so by the end of the day, we were able to erect a 2,200 square foot home, roof dried in. The lumber never will ever see a single drop of water. And all of these homes are made, with precision machinery, to high expectations, 2x10 stud frame walls. And it's a matter of taking out the intangibles and being able to manage true cost of what the material and the labor really is, with all things being the same, like weather inside of a building, they can predict that, right? So one of the things that these types of homes don't do is they don't travel well. So it's really going to be opportunities for building companies in regional areas around the country to set up shop, because these houses don't like to travel more than a couple hundred miles, or the nails and the screws start coming loose and the walls start jiggling, and they show up on site and they need to be reworked. So I would venture to say that by 2030, 50% or more of the homes, the affordable homes that are built in this country, are going to be built indoors in facilities like this that they have. In Sweden, it's 90%.
There is a startup in Vegas called Boxable.
Yeah.
And it's a foldable home.
Yep. There's a lot of conceptual.
Normal transport.
Yeah. There's a couple companies in California.
Are you guys still pre-revenue all of that? No,
Aren't they building some in Detroit? Aren't they building some?
There was one in Detroit. It moved out to Colorado. They're doing passive house walls.
Phoenix now.
I know
Phoenix.
Habitat in northern Michigan, for like the Toxie, they're doing prefab.
Yep, there's one up there that's doing it. That one of the guys in that group was on a trip to Sweden with us. He did his research. Yeah.
But they're not all of them.
No. A question from somebody here. From what you've seen so far, how's a residential net zero passive house building community doing when it comes to attracting and retaining marginalized workforce into their trades? And a follow-up to that, when the state or federal funding, for example, Marshall Plan for workforce development or weatherization gets released for the industry, how challenging or easy has it been for you to access or utilize that funding in your work, and also general workforce development in the green building community?
Well, that's a great question. I'm a general contractor, so we don't have employees.
Right.
We're struggling for labor, and we don't care where it comes from. We're happy to have, guys, girls, black, white, brown, or purple, on site, you know, ready to contribute. So, but if anybody else has, anything to say to that.
I'd say for us, that's a big focus for us, is really working on expanding our minority contractor base. And so a lot of it is, again, just education. And I think that's where have the opportunity to be able to kind of take that space and figure out how we can do that, because I mean, you guys don't have the time or necessarily the motivation to do that, and that's understandable. So that's something that we're trying to figure out and to delve into more. And I think one for us specifically for Energy Star, we need Energy Star HVAC contractors. In Grand Rapids there are 2. And so the one that we use primarily, we actually said, hey, do this certification, we will pay for it, we will help to teach you, and come along with us and help us do this, please. And we're back in that same space, and Brett, it really advocates for this too, where he's like, hey, there's this new company, and so we'll reach out to them and say, hey, this is what we need, can you come alongside of us, can we teach you, can we get the certification and do this education piece, and are continually trying to work to expand that and create that education.
So like Mike, I'm a general contractor as well, and if you're willing to come work, we'll take you. Show up that second day, you got a good thing going. So that's what we're dealing with. The labor market is insane. I've been asking my crew of carpenters. We work with 2 or 3 different crews of carpenters and rotate through them with all of our projects, and they're constantly they've had ads out for more help for the last 2 years.
Is it a generational thing that the older carpenters are retiring, or COVID has had an impact? I mean, what's your analysis?
I got a lot to say about that. I'll try to make it really short. About 8, let's see, around 2008, there was a big push for from a lot from the minority community for their kids to stop being pushed into trades programs. They wanted an equal slice of the pie and be promoting a 4-year education. So there was a big push from academics at the federal level to push for the 4-year education. And there was a funding and a funding drought and a pullback from these trade schools and trade programs that were in every community in the United States for 10 years. And we're starting to see the results of that now, the push for the 4-year education and the lack of options for kids that are not book smart or just want something different to be able to go and get those trade degrees. We're seeing a huge void coming through right now. There is some attrition from the older guys retiring. There's a little bit of, it depends on who you talk to, but of course there's a generational work ethic conversation that could take a couple hours to have. But I think that the big one is trade opportunities to learn the trades in the schools and placing value on it. You can live the American dream and you can own your own business if you get a HVAC license, an electrician license, a plumbing license, start your own company, have a fleet of vans. It's just as good as buying any franchise or going into business for yourself on any other risky level, that you have this going for you, and then that demand for that is always going to be there. So I really think it comes from the top down. I think it comes from getting back to pushing this through and at the high school level, getting those kids interested in saying, what, this is an option for you if you don't see yourself being Johnny College and you want something else. And then having that infrastructure there in place to be able to bring those kids into the workforce. I think it just for them to cut it off like that, I think was wrong. So and there's plenty to Google and look back and see how that changed. But I talked to a lot of educators who are talking about trying to bring that back into the fold now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question.
So I just want to support your point, but they pulled interest in trades out of the schools long before 2008. I graduated from high school in 2007. I was the only female in my drafting classes. I was the only female in my shop class in middle school, but they never promoted trade careers anywhere to anybody. It was college, college, college. And I'll tell you what I do. I'm BPI certified energy auditor. I could have foregone a college degree, and I could have gone into the field right away. And now I'm looking at 10 years into a career, wanting to kind of forego that and go into the trades, go become an HVAC contractor, because I see the need is there, or a builder. So I just think we shortchange not just the kids leaving school in 2008, but multiple generations.
There's two guys who want to hire you up here.
There's, you know, in terms of education, there's an opportunity now. We're seeing a resurgence of more programs coming out. We just in Grand Rapids had the West Michigan Construction Institute open, so it's starting to come back. But also, you know, we partner with our local high school. They've got a design and construction program. So these 17 and 18-year-olds come out to site and they, you know, are learning construction. But you know, everywhere those kids need that opportunity. So we need people, builders, to step up and do those partnerships and have those kids out and they can see themselves doing it and just get those on the job skills to be able to move up and be able to make their, you know, create their own companies.
Yeah, we have the student building program here in Ann Arbor that partners with Chelsea and Selena High School, and you know they're graduating about a dozen kids every year that come out of the program that compete on a national level. They have like a carpentry wall framing, you know, championship, and they place very high in those competitions. So we're doing what we can for the area, but I know every area needs it. So
I couldn't agree with Mike more. It's really comes down to the value placed on trades folks. Like, cause even myself, I graduated high school in 1999, and my whole entire life growing up, my dad was a factory worker at Ford's, and his mission was to make sure I did not end up next to him in a factory at Ford's, you know, which that's understandable, but there was never any talk about, hey, become an electrician or HVAC or a plumber or a carpenter or anything like that. So my focus was getting into college. And luckily, my background in architecture blends right in with building sciences and everything like that perfectly fine. But, you know, there's a lot of folks out there like Deanna over there that has a degree that they're not using, you know, or it's really hard to get into one of those positions where everybody graduating college, there's a high percentage of people fighting for a low percentage amount of jobs, and you're all at entry level. And, or you could come out of high school and, you know, I have no interest in being a lawyer or a doctor or any other kind of professional. You can then go get certified, become an HVAC. I'm sure all HVAC people I talk to, they take anybody to come help and start working. And you can start and have a good paying job and not be saddled down with $100,000 of debt after 4 years of college, and actually be in your early 20s, making money, have your own house, have your own vehicles, take care of yourself as a young adult. And it's just like that focus has been there's been no focus on that as a viable option for the young people coming out. And as Mike alluded to, the younger generation we're dealing with these days, they definitely have a different work ethic, you know, compared to how I grew up, to where you put everything
for a million years.
Yeah, right.
You put everything you got into it, you do it right, you give it your all, you know. But you know, there's different things to discuss on that, and we are seeing a lot of the older folks, especially in the framing carpentry world, they're starting to get their late 30s. Once they hit the late 30s standpoint, they start looking how to transition out of being outside when it's 0 degrees, up on a roof, putting down sheeting. You know, that's kind of, you just kind of start saying, hey, I can't do this till I'm 65, right? So they start looking for other avenues. It may be in the building industry, but a lot of times they transition out of the building industry. So
if they don't have a plan, yeah.
Did you have any comments?
Well, I don't have much experience with hiring contractors, but certainly friends and family have helped us out. And I did find that people that had less experience were actually more accepting of the new way of building. Whereas like people that have been in the industry, they have their way that they want to do things. And you say, okay, well, I actually want you to do it this way. They're like, okay, and you turn it back. And like, they really want you to do it this way. It's like, no, actually, we're trying to change the way we build things. So that was definitely an interesting experience. You know, teaching people and then working with people that already had experience.
That's a really good point.
You know, you talk about the Buildings are starting built inside, you're not going to have a rough carpenter and might need more finished carpenters. And those are special skills that an artist. I think that was a plastic surgeon will find touches, you know, on someone.
Right.
I don't know if you know, but there is a modular company on the west side of the state. And they actually are buying up, there's another builder in town, which could be a part of Michael. Building an all modular house on Division Street. It's a multi-family house.
Okay.
All electric. It's going for people. It's going for passive house, living building challenge, and all
Interesting.
all modular. It's going through. It's had political issues with historic district and all that.
How, when you say modular, could you be more specific?
It's being built actual, all the components, like you said, with the walls being brought in.
That's general housing, right?
It's 530 North Division.
So that would be with the siding, windows installed, insulation. Is that drywall too, or
I'm not sure.
not insulated?
Exactly how, but it's going to be brought in.
Okay, because there's a lot of prefab that is still available where we can get our exterior walls built and shipped to us with the, you know, zip sheeting on the outside. And we have to install windows on site. That's a pretty, that's
the builders does it.
a lot of builders use that option just because it speeds things up. The walls are framed, we put them together and get going. Depends on time of year.
You want to talk about plates now?
And the Phoenix wall, yeah, we used a wall that was built for passive house that was about 12 inches thick. And it came with cellulose in the cavities.
Microphone guy.
Oh, yeah, sure. And it was a great wall, aside from one problem is that what they didn't tell us was that they were moving their fabrication facility from Detroit to Colorado. So that wall had to, those walls had to travel from Colorado back to Michigan. And by the time they got to Michigan, the studs on the ends of each, 12-foot section, 10-foot section of wall had bowed out from the up and down motion of the truck and the cellulose pushing on it. So by the time we ran these walls in succession down a 65-foot run, we're hanging over the edge of the deck by 2 inches at the end and scratching our heads going, what happened? And then we realized, there's a half-inch gap between each wall section, and there's your 6 gaps, there's your 3 inches. So we had to fight that and wrestle that back in. So that's why I say, there's a lot of opportunity for, production to be regional, because the walls just don't travel well. It's a great idea. They just don't travel well. So, but that was a walls are up in a day, and they're ready for roof trusses. So it's a way to speed things up, especially when labor is expensive.
We're coming up on our time, so I thought I'd just give you all a chance to just do some final thoughts and where people can learn more or contact you if they want to work with you. So how we do that? Go ahead, Dan.
I think there's so much I've learned over the past couple of years. It's definitely something I'm going to do again. And the fact that my wife and I can build a net zero home, I mean, that should be motivating to anyone that it's possible. You can certainly do it. There's the educational material is out there. I mean, the amount that we've learned just from YouTube is incredible. I mean, anywhere from the Essential Craftsman to Matt Risinger. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with his work. The information is out there now. Maybe it wasn't 10 or 20 years ago, but it's there. And I encourage everyone to check it out, see what you can find. There's tons of, if you want books, there's books too. And that's really kind of what drove us to be able to achieve our goals. It's just the knowledge that's available to us now.
Well, from a building standpoint, we have a really nice website. You can check that out, Fireside Home Construction. We'd be happy to talk with you about any projects. We do full new custom homes and remodeling from any level. I always tell folks, if you want me to build your doghouse or $10 million house, we're we're able and willing to do it all, so. From a kind of moving forward standpoint, one thing that would be, like we were touching earlier on the trades, is just really, if you have young folks that have any kind of interest or anything, do not poo-poo going into the trades, because we need them. And there's nothing wrong with it, and it's the stigma that's on being a plumber or a tradesperson is that needs to go away, and it's because we're suffering now from that, so.
Only at your worst too.
Yeah, and so, anything like that, anything that you can encourage with those folks, that would be welcome. And from a sustainable design standpoint, working with nice people like Michael here, I highly encourage that. And, if you have any questions or anything on especially like the high performing value engineered type homes and things that we have done to achieve that in the past for a very high performing type of house. We really specialize in that, and we're not afraid to value engineer stuff and try to get into the nuts and bolts of what does one wall system cost versus another wall system, and see what we can do to make that work for you for your budget, and also how you want it to be from a performance and looks standpoint. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, and we're not afraid to roll our sleeves up and do that hard work. So we'd be happy to help you out.
I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't point to the social justice issues that are around energy efficiency. Right now, it's not for everybody. It's for certain communities, and marginalized communities are not a part of that. And so for us, it feels really important to bring that to the entire population. And so for, I would just kind of give you a call to action. If there's a way that you can engage with whoever that might be, if it is your local habitat in terms of education or whatever you can offer, to really look at that disparity and just see ways that you can personally interact with it. So I think that's a big thing for us. And going forward, it's just how do we continue to improve. And I would invite any of you that think you have some education to offer or anything like that, please get in touch with me, because like these guys, time is limited. So I'm not always necessarily doing all of the research, but would definitely benefit from the expertise that you have. So definitely invite you to connect with me if you have something to offer.
My name is Mike Mahon with Adaptive Building Solutions, and you can get a hold of us on our website at adaptivebuilding.com. All of our phone numbers and email are on that site. We are kind of a boutique builder in that we really service the client and spend a lot of time with them and spend a lot of time on our job sites. So we only build 3 to 4 projects a year, and we're not super high volume in that regards. We're generally booked out about a year in advance. So if you're interested in doing a project, plan ahead and reach out, because projects like this require a lot of planning. And the design process is a great education to understanding your home as well. One of the things I wanted to just shout out what Jake had mentioned about the stigma for the plumber. My plumber was gone for a week in March because he had to take his whole family to Vail to go see. And my HVAC guy, is gone all this week with his sons up, in Alaska, fly fishing. These guys are killing it. They're making a great living. They've got, 13, 14, 15 employees. And they're smart guys that just put their nose down and did the work early and have built their little empires. And those are awesome opportunities for anybody who's ambitious. Even though we build luxury, custom, energy efficient, high performance, sustainable homes, we're always interested in helping our friends with Habitat and our local customers that come to our behind the drywall tours to understand how we can create opportunities to build like this at a lower price. And we collaborated with our architectural partner, Michael Clement at Architectural Resources, and we'll be coming up with some designs for some homes that we think are going to be very high performance at a low cost. You know, the most simple house form is a rectangle shape. And if all the design elements are going into the right places, we think we can bring down the cost on that and make it so that it's much more widely affordable, I think, to the average family. So look for more information on that, the websites in the months ahead. We're working on it.
Thank you.
All right, well, I really, again, want to appreciate, thanks to our speakers here, Jamie, Mike, Abby, Jake for coming out, and thanks again to all of you for joining us here, both in person and online. And a big thanks to our executive director, Jose Reina here for running the Zoom for us and helping with questions. And then all of our planning partners, again, Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Association, Michigan Geothermal Energy Association, the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, DFD Architecture, who's also Dave Dye, who sits on our board, and Architectural Resources here, Michael Clement, for helping us plan these sessions and keeping them going. We will be over at the Home Electrification Expo with our vendors and all of our sponsors at 5 o'clock tonight. So hopefully everyone can head over there and just keep this conversation going and meet with some great manufacturers and service providers in the area to help you understand better on how to do this. So thanks again, everybody. We'll have this recorded and published on our YouTube channel, and we'll keep the conversation going on with all of you. So take care, be well, stay safe out there. Thanks.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.